Welcome to reInvent. It's that time of year again. Although I'm still here in my bedroom and not there in Las Vegas. Well, yet, but I will be in time. But this is a video on demand version of IoT 206, Scaling Sustainability Solutions with IoT. And my name is Mark Ralph. I'm the Director of Business Development, Strategy, and Sales for IoT at AWS. And it's my pleasure to be kicking off this session today, talking about a topic that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, but one that I was really excited to be asked to speak to around sustainability and IoT's role to play. I'm going to be joined later by Sandy Coleman from Siemens, who's going to be our special guest to help me dig into this topic. Sandy's going to tell us some great stories about smart buildings and some of the work that Siemens is doing in that area, which is so critical for a lot of organizations around sustainability. But before we kick off, I've made it a bit of a habit in a lot of my reInvent talks to start out with a little bit of historical context. Right now, sustainability and climate change and climate action and other environmental concerns are definitely top of mind, high in the news cycle. But it's not the first time that this has happened, and it can almost seem a little insurmountable. What can all of us do as individuals, as organizations, to make a difference? But it has happened. We can act. We can come together to make a difference. And there's a good lesson in not too distant history around what is possible. I'll talk. If you're perhaps my age, you remember this a little bit better than others. But the story I'd tell is around ozone depletion. From about the 1920s, there was this chemical, carbon tetrachloride. Ooh, that's a hard one to get out. That started as an invention to help fight fires, particularly in aviation. It was a very useful chemical. It was deployed widely in aviation and through the war. And then it was discovered that it could be used for cooling. And through the 20s, and onward, there was this acceleration of the use of this chemical, which is essentially a technology to try and make industry and people's lives better. It's kind of a good reason to do that. But there was a downside. It was quickly discovered quite early on that these chemicals and the release of these chemicals into the atmosphere was having this detrimental impact on the Earth's ozone layer. Scientists started observing. That image is from satellite observation of the ozone layer over the poles, and it was so evident that these chemicals were causing this damage that groups started to come together in the scientific community, in industry, in government, to talk about what could be done. It seemed this is going to be a huge worldwide problem. How could we ever possibly overcome this? And in 1985, there was a convention that focused on establishing a protocol to fight this problem. And it culminated later in the Montreal Protocol in 1987 that had organizations and government and industry committing to take steps to resolve this problem. It meant eliminating the use of those CFCs, migrating technologies to new ways of doing things, discovering how to solve problems in different and less harmful ways. Maybe sounds a little familiar at this point, doesn't it? And most recently, I think it was 2019, where the latest really deep study into the current status of that ozone layer discovered that we are now back to the smallest amount of ozone depletion detected since we started surveying, almost a significant reversal of this problem. Now, I could spend a lot of time, and obviously this is a high-level description of the problem, but it highlights one really important thing, which is we can come together. We can absolutely take steps to help drive change, and technology is a huge part of doing that. And so I thought that was a great way to sort of set up today's topic of sustainability and climate action, because as we all know, This is an incredibly important and hot topic. The UN has set a set of sustainability goals. Those sustainability goals talk about not just climate and the environment, but sustainability goals on a worldwide basis, areas of focus. There's actually 17 of those sustainability goals, and several of them speak to climate action, energy efficiency, renewable resource development, new ways of developing products, recycling, and so forth. And it's the UN's mission to try and drive as much adoption of these 17 goals as possible. It's seen as a key for our growth worldwide looking into the future. There's also something that's been in the press as we speak, recording this video, COP26, which is a worldwide UN-sponsored summit on climate change, is underway right now in Glasgow, Scotland. And by the time a lot of us travel to Vegas, a lot of the outcomes of that conference will be well underway. And you're seeing governments and industry, high-profile leaders, activists, and interest groups all coming together to deeply discuss what needs to happen looking into the future around climate change. And this is the real key for those who aren't as familiar. The key right now is how can we hold warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century? How can we set targets? How can we take steps? How can we change how we live, how we build, how we operate to contribute to holding to this 1.5 degree of warming? If it rises above that, and if you aren't familiar with this IPCC report, this is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, that really outlines why 1.5 degrees is so critical. It doesn't sound like a lot, but you think of this on a worldwide scope and stage, that without taking this action, you actually see warming beginning to accelerate. And the steps to actually cut greenhouse gas emissions to drive the kind of sustainability efforts that we need are actually going to be relatively significant to be able to hold to that 1.5 degree change. Beyond that, the repercussions start to sound fairly grim and somewhat irreversible. And so there is a significant call at COP26 and around the world in other venues as well to really take this warning seriously. And so that's a lot to take in. That may leave you saying, wow, that seems like a problem maybe beyond an individual or beyond a particular company. And, you know, here at Amazon, it's become pretty near and dear to our hearts. You know, for those that don't know, as an organization, we have these things called leadership principles. And we've actually added a leadership principle focused on our responsibilities as we grow as an organization. And one of the things that we've helped to spearhead is something called the Climate Pledge. And it's a commitment by organizations to drive a sustainable future. It was announced in conjunction with Global Optimism early in 2019, and it's to help meet the Paris Accord targets 10 years earlier. It's to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2040. And what it seeks to do is drive a path to 100% renewable energy by 2025. And we've committed $2 billion to the Climate Pledge Fund. This is something we take very seriously across all of our operations here at Amazon. But we're not alone. The Climate Pledge has seen organizations across the board all commit to taking similar steps as their organization. There's over 200 signatories across 26 industries and 21 countries who've all signed up to this. You can read more if you go to theclimatepledge.com for all of the details. And that's something we've stepped up to do. It's something that we feel is critically important as an organization as we look into the future. And so with that as a backdrop, other companies may say, hey, we want to do something similar. We have a desire to help contribute. We want to take steps to find ways where we can help reduce our emissions, to drive energy efficiency, to do our part to hold to that 1.5 degrees. And it occurs to me, spending so much time in IoT, that IoT is kind of the perfect area for thinking about how technology can help contribute to driving sustainability, how you can harness the power of IoT to make these kinds of projects come true. And why would that be? I think there's a couple of reasons. One is the sheer number of devices that are installed out in the world. Today there's estimated about 36 billion IoT devices out in the world, and that's going to grow to about 75 billion devices by 2025. Those devices generate massive amounts of data. And we're going to come back to this a lot in this talk. It's really data that's going to help us drive sustainability goals. It's data that helps us make decisions. It's data that drives new applications, and it's data that helps us decide on new ways of doing things. 4.4 zettabytes of data generated today by IoT devices alone, growing to 79 zettabytes of data in the future. That's enormous. And, not specific to sustainability, but it's estimated about 60% of major organizations are considering some kind of digital transformation strategy that involves IoT. And so if you combine that effort with a desire to contribute to sustainability goals, often those two things come together. And so IoT is important for a variety of reasons. I think it starts way out at the edge. What other technology instruments the physical world that is out there touching the machines, the turbines, the solar fields, that helps in farming, all these areas that we have to think about? Starting way out at the edge, the sensors, the gateways, all of those devices generating that data, and how do you bring that into a point that can be useful? That is what IoT is all about. And then it goes to taking that data and driving a level of insights. And it's those insights that ultimately will drive the kind of business outcomes that we're anticipating. For the last several years, AWS has been investing heavily in IoT technologies to make this as easy as possible. We're going to hear some stories as we go through the session on ways customers, and specifically Siemens, have used some of these technologies to help make it as easy as possible to build IoT-based solutions. And that ranges at the edge in technologies like AWS IoT Greengrass, tools like AWS IoT Core and Sitewise to ingest that data, to wrangle that data into a form that can be usable to drive levels of insight, integration into our machine learning and analytics tools, things like Amazon Monitron, or Lookout for Equipment to get insight into your operations, or Amazon SageMaker to be able to drive advanced machine learning models on that data. All of these tools come together as a part of our IoT strategy as a set of tools to hopefully make it easy for you and your organization to build these kinds of applications. And for us, we think of all of these tools as somewhat of a closed loop set of technologies to be able to collect, to analyze, and to act on the data that comes from the edge, that comes from physically instrumenting to the world and drives into the kinds of applications. And in the case of sustainability, the dashboards, the insights, the changes to processes that are absolutely going to be required for us to meet the kinds of goals that we expect. Now, customers are doing some amazing things with AWS IoT, and many of them speak to varying types of sustainable goals. And that ranges from improving performance and productivity in industrial operations, thinking about remote health and patient wellness, more efficient supply chain operations, smarter homes and buildings, smart agriculture, more advanced energy management, more advanced transportation, and advances in worker safety. All of these today are use cases for IoT. And while they may not be energy sustainability, they're all driving a better world, all on the basis of IoT data. And that's pretty exciting. And I'd love to tell you some of those stories, and I'll just pick a few. We could go on for hours talking about the amazing things that our customers are doing. But I just wanted to give you a little snippet of some of the work that's very sustainability specific that our customers are using IoT to drive. And let's start with agriculture. This is a really exciting one. Coming from a family that has a deep agriculture background, coming out of the prairies in Canada. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. My wife's grandfather, who started with one of the first mechanized tractors in his town, I think would now be amazed how far technology has come. And so you look at an organization like CropX, who use above ground and in soil sensors to generate data that's combined with imaging, weather, topology information, soil data, and it's all combined with machine learning to help drive crop yield, to make watering decisions, fertilizer decisions, all to try save water, to avoid the use of chemicals when not necessary, and to drive up crop yields. All of that energy savings is absolutely critical. Agriculture is one of the places where massive amounts of energy are used every year and, quite frankly, often wasted every year. And advancements in this area can help us meet those goals. And CropX is out on the forefront of doing that kind of work. Now, another example I'll give you in agriculture, it's actually a slightly different kind of example and a really fun one, in my opinion, but a really important one is what the folks at BeeWise are doing. They are using technology to help address a real growing problem of bee mortality. Now, bees are so important in the ecosystem for pollination of plants. And if the bees start to die, the plants start to die, we start to see entire systems fall apart. And so they've taken this challenge, and they're actually using sensors connected by IoT Core and using our device management services to help ensure the health of the colonies of bees, to ensure that those bees are able to pollinate the plants effectively. They've actually managed to lower bee mortality rates by about 40% compared to beehives that are unmanaged and unmonitored by their services. And their robotic, AI-controlled beehives are having this very direct effect on a very important part of the ecosystem. I think it's an absolutely fascinating story, and it's a good thing for the bees as well. Another one is in energy management, and we think about SoulShare. And SoulShare is super, super interesting. What they do is they allow people to trade excess solar energy from in-home solar systems. This is, I think, going to become more and more prevalent as we rethink how our energy grids are built. As you move to microgrids and peer-to-peer distributed power distribution, this kind of approach is going to be critical, where you can actually generate enough energy to be contributing back onto those grids. And SoulShare uses our IoT services, particularly FreeRTOS, on these microcontroller-sized devices to be able to implement this microgrid logic across their solar deployments. It connects to Greengrass out at the edge and allows them to build this cutting-edge energy management system for their customers. Another great example in the energy management space. In industrial, I mentioned industrial, and factories and supply chains are an important part of the equation of sustainability. This is probably one of the most important areas right now where IoT is being contemplated for sustainability. The other, which we're going to talk about in a moment with buildings themselves. And one of our core customers in Europe, a division of Coca-Cola, is using our IoT services to reimagine their factory operations. And they're thinking about this in a number of ways: how they maintain their equipment, how they drive efficiency of their operations, how they maintain uptime of their equipment. But very specifically for this story, they're trying to drive efficiency. And what they have found is by implementing a more broad smart factory solution across their operations, they're able to drive efficiency in their production facilities. That efficiency leads directly into their environmental sustainability goals. They've actually already saved 20% on energy annually and 9% of the water compared to previous years annually in those operations as well. And that's purely driven by reducing waste, by ensuring that the lines are operating at peak performance and avoiding downtime. They've also managed to implement something called a clean-in-place process, which allows them to not have to take entire sections of the line offline and be able to do point cleaning to be able to keep the systems running at the highest efficiency, and also using the least amount of resources to do that during operational times. It's really interesting. The team at CCI really called this out as one of their core reasons for wanting to implement an industrial IoT solution across their factory. And I think it's something that you'll begin to see more and more organizations begin to focus on going into the future. And that brings us to buildings. This is a fun one for me. As a hockey fan here in Seattle, I'm also a hockey fan, born and raised in Toronto, but I'm here in Seattle now. We just got a new NHL team, the Seattle Kraken, and the Seattle Kraken play in this amazing new building called Climate Pledge Arena. Now, Climate Pledge Arena, you say, okay, it's a hockey rink. What's the big deal? It's actually one of the most interesting smart building projects that I've seen in a long, long time. They actually have a goal to be the most sustainable sports arena and facility of its kind in the world. They actually are trying to create the first international Living Future Institute certified zero carbon arena in the world. And they're doing that in a couple of really fascinating ways. I mean, the first thing that they did was they built the building out of a lot of existing parts. So they actually preserved the roof, not only for historical reasons. It was a building built during the World's Fair, along with the Space Needle, but they actually have used it to preserve and not have to go build a net new building. And so they actually raised it and floated it for a while as they dug down below. So you're actually seeing a reuse of the land and a reuse of much of the space as you can. But they went way beyond that. They've implemented electric-only kitchens. So there's no gas used in any of the kitchens inside the facility. They do water reclamation. So all of the rainwater comes off the roof and is gathered and is used in the production of the ice, for example, for hockey. They have solar power and other sustainable power sources driving the building, and they've tried to eliminate zero use, or they're trying to get to the elimination of single-use plastics. So there'll be no single-use plastics in the facility, and you actually see that in the concessions. It's really interesting. People wondered, obviously, the building is named after the climate pledge, but there's a ton of technology that has gone into making a building like that work the way that it So that brings us to buildings. I think one of the most fascinating parts of sustainability for a lot of organizations. Everyone has a building, everyone has facilities if you're an organization. There's a lot of energy spent in buildings. It's one of the largest areas. And so I really am pleased to be able to invite her onto the stage, our special guest for this presentation to talk about IoT and smart buildings. Please welcome Sandy Coleman, who's the Executive Vice President of R&D at Siemens, who's going to take us through some of the amazing things that they are doing at Siemens for themselves and for their customers, and how they've done it using some of AWS's technology. Over to you, Sandy.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the introduction. While I haven't been to Climate Pledge Arena, I have been to many arenas through my career. And so I'm really looking forward to going to the arena and seeing all the cool things that have been implemented. In the interim, let's talk about reaching net zero operations. Siemens is very committed to achieving their own sustainability goals. We committed to achieving these in 2014 and then recommitted again in 2020 by committing to the climate pledge along with Amazon and other enterprise customers. In that 6-year period, we were already able to reduce our carbon emissions by greater than 50%. And you might ask how we're able to do that. What we've done is we've really eaten our own dog food. We use our solutions. We use our services across all of our global real estate portfolio. And that's what's allowing us to drive that reduction in carbon emissions. In addition to driving our own sustainability goals, obviously our goal is to really support customers and help them optimize the efficiency of their buildings. Buildings are 42% of energy consumption and CO2 emissions. Last year alone, Siemens was able to help their customers reduce their CO2 emissions by 10.5 million tons. In addition to that, they were able to save over 2 billion euros in energy costs. You might ask, how do we do this? And for Siemens, we believe the key to sustainability is really a smart building. It begins with data. If you can't manage what you can't measure. We have over 400 million square feet of deployed sensors that are bringing data to the cloud on a regular interval. The reliability, the importance of the efficiency of receiving that data and then processing that data is key to what we do in driving sustainability, helping customers understand their energy needs, their efficiencies within their buildings, whether it's things like temperature control or understanding the utilization of the building, or even for some of our more advanced customers being an energy prosumer. And what I mean by that one is if you think of, I'll give an example of one of our largest high-tech companies in Silicon Valley has over 15 million square feet of lighting sensors deployed. And what they're able to do is not only understand their own energy consumption, but they're able to, during peak workload of energy, work with the different energy local governing bodies basically to sell back energy to the grid. They very simply set programs within the software to dim their lights between certain hours from 2 to 5 in the afternoon. And it happens very gradually. You don't go from a bright building to a dark building. But that actually allows them to reduce their energy consumption by around 50%. They then sell that energy back to the grid. So not only are they being more efficient with their local energy, they're also helping out the local area. And all of these types of services are running on top of Amazon Web Services. As buildings become smarter and there are more connected devices in buildings, we're still dealing with the same individual unique personas that have different objectives that they're trying to accomplish. But they do all have some common objectives like reducing the capital and operating expenses, enhancing space and asset efficiency, and really increasing sustainability. And we get very similar questions, whether it's a CXO or an operator, which is how can technology and digitalization help what I'm trying to do? How do I reach net carbon emissions? how advanced am I on this journey compared to others? And really one of the key questions is, whom do I partner with? And we believe the answer to that is Siemens and AWS. For us, it began with future-proofing spaces. And this journey for us began about 12 years ago. And at that time, we had to build everything, starting with our lighting sensors that were deployed in the lights. And the advantage of sensors in lighting is that there was a very dense grid and that there was no additional need for additional power. It was low maintenance and high reliability. And even at that time, because of the dense grid, we were able to bring in a lot of other information. We were able, through the Bluetooth beacons, to do wayfinding and motion detection. We're able to control your temperature by connecting into the HVAC systems in the building, adjust your power. All of these different models basically are the things that we focus on in our solutions. Talking about another one of our key customers, Salesforce.com, leverages our lighting control to really drive very significant energy savings for their business. And, they have a range of 60 to 90+%. Obviously, the 90+% was during COVID when there wasn't a lot of occupancy in the buildings, but they were able to really reduce their energy and dynamically control their global portfolio to basically take advantage of the fact that no one was in the building, but they could control it remotely and really almost shut down any areas that weren't being leveraged. One of the human interest stories that I think is pretty cool is they also used the system to create a heart on the side of Salesforce Tower that sort of beaconed out over the city, providing a little bit of hope through kind of those dark times. So that was kind of a fun side benefit. At Comfy and Enlighted, our goal is really bringing people, data, and solutions together. And that all begins with the IoT devices at the edge. So whether those are Enlighted lighting sensors, whether those are HVAC controls, people counting sensors, lights and shades, it all starts with that data and the reliability of ingesting that into the platform in a scalable manner, and then taking it, providing context to that data, and then providing solutions that drive business operations and efficiencies for our customers. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do that. So when you look at IoT and data, again, we use this to drive hybrid work and contribute to sustainability. Our goal is to really securely connect millions of square feet to AWS to unlock the power of that data. Our goal is not necessarily to build the non-value add things. So we'll talk a little bit about what Amazon does versus what we do in this model. When we're commissioning a building, we start with the sensors in the ceiling and the grid, and then we have to commission the gateways, which are going to do the connection into the cloud. When the gateways arrive on site, they have a fleet certificate. And so when they're doing that connectivity using IoT Core that's been pre-programmed into the firmware on the devices, they go through a process of validation with our Bootstrap service to make sure that those are valid devices they should be connecting in. At that point in time, they're given the proper endpoints to connect to. And when they get there, again, they still only have a fleet certificate. They then go through an IoT certificate provisioning so that each device has an individual certificate. And again, this is one of the key things about working with AWS, working with their IoT services. We could have built, the IoT certificate process ourselves, and we had something very similar to that previously on another cloud, but it's not a value add for what we do. So that's something that we've kind of turned over to Amazon because that's something that they can do well, and we can just leverage it. The data that's coming in, we then take that data, we're able to use IoT rules, IoT policies, and combine that with Lambda, and basically, have a pub/sub type topic structure where that can go to different services. It can provide different data to different solutions that we're driving towards. So when we look back at what we had previously before the migration over to Amazon, just in the data ingestion piece, And at that time, with a very small portfolio of our customers on the cloud, we were managing 26 servers, and they had things on it like Cassandra and Kafka, and we were doing load balancing, and all of those things, took a specialized skill set that really wasn't our business value add. And so having to keep up with that with a really lean team and apply those specialized skills really wasn't a value add for us as a customer for what we were trying to drive, which is really around hybrid work, sustainability. Those are our business values. So again, when we made that move, all of those servers went away. We went to a serverless model. We also use other managed services like Aurora and Kinesis, but everything that we do is serverless first. And that allowed us to eliminate not just the servers and the maintenance of those types of non-value add things on the IoT ingestion piece, but also on the processing piece and the lighting as a service piece. So again, that's sort of the model that we follow, and it's really key to our success in the market. So now I'm going to take you into one of our solutions. I'm not going to go into all of our solutions. We're going to talk a little bit about Comfy, which is really a workplace experience solution that allows companies and customers to really drive improved operational results. So they're bringing in, going back to the IoT things on the left side of the screen, they're bringing in shades, which are running on OPC UA, and they're bringing in HVAC, which is on BACnet. So we have a ton of different protocols that are running on the edge. They all come in here through a software-based device, also running IoT Core on it, that allows us to bring that data in a very similar fashion to our actual gateways that come out that are more of a kind of a hardwired type device. So we're following the same philosophy regardless of how we're bringing that data into the cloud, so there's a consistency. Whether it's the ingestion pieces that you saw on the previous slide or the pieces here, again, we're very much dependent on Amazon for some of their key strengths. So whether it's on the security piece and we're using guard duty or the networking piece, and we've got VPC flow logs and CloudWatch, management of the environments, we use that across all of our infrastructure. And then we work on the pieces that are important for our customers. So when we look at something like a Comfy and how it ties into sustainability, how it ties into reducing your CO2 emissions, again, it goes back to making sure that we're bringing the data in a reliable, secure, scalable manner. And we depend very heavily on Amazon for those pieces. We bring in all these different forms of data, whether it's occupancy or elevator usage or heating and lighting information, and then we use that information to create insights in the building. Again, leveraging different components of Amazon, different search items, different AI ML type of items, but to give that information to the portfolio managers that are managing all these buildings. In this case, Arvado is managing 30 European offices. They've got 7,000 employees in 15 countries. Obviously, during COVID, they were looking at how are we most effectively using our space? Do we need to release space? How can we use our building more efficiently? Can we shut down floors in the building? Can we go to using less buildings? Should we go to smaller satellite offices? They were able to leverage this data. Even though everybody was remote, except for a few individuals, they were able to leverage this to really plan out their space utilization and really be effective in how they manage that portfolio. So how does AWS support Siemens' mission? Again, our mission is to securely connect millions of square feet to unlock that data and really enable the future of hybrid work and sustainability. So a couple of the key things here for us are being able to bring in millions of devices and petabytes of data. We want to be able to scale depending on the use case and how things are bursting in a very automatic way. And we don't want to build the church for Easter and Christmas. So it's important that the environments that we're built on are able to scale and handle that kind of scale. It's important that it's a cost-effective scaling. So we're not paying for compute. We're not paying for things that we're not leveraging. Obviously, security, I can't say enough about, is super key to our future, and it's baked into everything that Amazon does, and we use every component of it that we can. And all of these things combined allow us to really focus on our business, our competitive differentiators, and support our global customers. So the ability for IoT Core to roll out in US East and then roll out to Frankfurt or somewhere in Asia Pacific allows us to take our solutions and really make them global very quickly, because everything we do is automated and we're able to roll out to new regions in less than a day. So all of those things combined is how AWS supports us in our mission of IoT and sustainability. You can tell from this that we're extremely focused on driving sustainability, delivering solutions that help both our customers and obviously ourselves in reaching those goals. This is a recent project that was just announced that I think is pretty exciting from a slightly different perspective. It's a university that's wanting to be the smartest university campus in the world. Siemens is basically sponsoring the PhD students and co-designing the research with them. We're deploying sensors, we're gathering data, but we're also creating a living lab so that they can look at this data in new ways. They can look at new ways to use decentralized energy, to use renewable energy. So again, they're looking at the platform we've built and the data that we're bringing in, and they're trying to look at new ways to drive to some of these goals. So to summarize, we believe that sustainability is definitely on the rise. It's something being driven by CEOs, by landlords, by others in the buildings. And again, it all starts with bringing together the data, getting it to the cloud in a reliable and a connected manner so that we can do command and control, so that we can have visibility into all those IoT devices. Then taking that data and making sure that we can do analytics on it and really make sure that we can drive a super positive employee experience and make sure that our customers are really driving their sustainability and energy objectives within those smart buildings. And we do that with the support of Amazon Web Services, whether it's a hockey arena, an office building, a manufacturing facility. Amazon is helping us focus on the things that we do best, and they're focusing on the things that they do best. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark to finish out the session.
Thanks so much, Sandy. That was amazing. So fascinating to hear about how Siemens is helping all of your customers achieve their sustainability goals through some really intelligent smart building implementations. Really fascinating to hear how you've used so many of our AWS IoT services and other AWS services to get that done. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us in this session. And I know we're doing this virtually right now. I'll see you in Vegas for the in-person version of this as well. Well, that's it for our session. We just thought we'd wrap up with a few pointers for you. There's quite a bit of sustainability content here at reInvent this year, and it'll be available on demand as well. And you can see some of the session numbers there. So if you really want to take a deeper dive into things Amazon and AWS are doing along with our customers and partners to help drive sustainability solutions, please go spend some time and check out those other sessions. We talked a lot about IoT today, and if you'd like to learn more about what we do in the IoT space, I hope that you really do want to learn more. I highly recommend going over to the IoT track. In addition to this session, there's a whole host of other sessions focused on our IoT services and software and technologies, what our partners are doing, filled with lots of amazing stories of what customers have done with these technologies to implement IoT solutions. So definitely check those out as well. On behalf of Sandy, I really want to thank you for taking the time to listen to our session today. We hope you found it as interesting as it was to develop. and talk to you about it today. Sustainability is so important, and I'm sure we've only just scratched the surface of everything possible, but perhaps we've inspired you and your organization to take some steps. And if there's anything that we here at AWS and our friends and partners like at Siemens can do to help, please let us know. Enjoy the rest of reInvent, and thanks for tuning in.